10. I think we're still there. We've been the last couple weeks going through kind of the clearing of house, if you will, specifically of Ahab's house by Jehu. Jehu had been anointed to be king of Israel, and one of his instructions, first off, was to go wipe out the entire house of Ahab. Now, if you were wanting to be king of a country, the one thing you would want to do is wipe out any person that would have claim to the throne anyway. So that was probably in his own self-interest to do. So he doesn't have any problems doing it. And we've kind of noticed as we've gone along that Jehu seems to be a very popular figure in Israel. People just kind of instantly are willing to turn sides from Ahab's household to his side, kind of at the drop of a hat, it seems, in many instances, with no discussion, no conversation other than, hey, do what I tell you or else, and then that's about it. So we've gone through, and he's done many things thus far. We haven't quite finished with Jehu yet, but so far he took control of the army of Israel that was supposed to be fighting against Hazael, and they went to Jezreel. Joram was there recovering. Ahaziah, king of Judah, was there to see him. He kills both of them and all the household of Ahab that happens to be in Jezreel. That includes Jezebel. It includes the chief officials, associates, friends, anyone that has any sort of connection to the Ahab family, even if not by blood. He is wiping them all out. He's making his statement very clear. Then he heads down to, we see him go down to Samaria. He runs into some relatives of King Ahaziah, who had gone up. It seems they hadn't heard what had happened. They'd gone up to give kind of their well wishes to Joram and to Jezebel. So he kills all of them too, even though they probably didn't really have anything to do with the house of Ahab, aside from they were going to send their well wishes, and that was enough. And we also see that Jehonadab joins Jehu, and I brought this verse up last week, and I want to bring it up again. Verse 16, where Jehu says to him, "Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord." We're going to see exactly how far the zeal goes, probably by the end of today. So they join forces. He gets to Samaria. He kills every one of Ahab's family in Samaria. Remember, Samaria is the capital, so he's cleaned house. Every one of Ahab's household has been destroyed in Israel, for the most part. He's got one more objective he's going to accomplish. That's going to put us starting at verse 18. So let me get someone to read for us 2 Kings chapter 10, verses 18 through 28, please. 18 through 28. Okay, thank you. I know it was a little lengthy, but it's kind of hard to break that up because it's all kind of one thing happening here. So Ahab's house, that's been decimated. Well, not decimated literally. It's been destroyed. Decimated means you have a little bit of left over, but it's been destroyed. So Jehu moves now to take out the prophets of Baal here. So remember back, I said in verse 16, where he says, come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. Okay, just remember that statement. Just keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that. So he concocts this devious plan. He's going to pretend to say, I'm going to be an even better servant of Baal than Ahab. Ahab served Baal a little. I'm going to serve him much. Which is funny because who built the temple of Ahab in Samaria? Or the temple of Baal? I've already said it. The temple of Baal in Samaria was built by Ahab. I was going to give a little quiz there, but so to say the guy who built the temple, I'm going to be more of service to Baal than that guy. That's a high bar, I guess. But that's what he says, and he's pretending. This is all pretense. This is all a false notion. He calls together all the servants, all the priests of Baal, not one missing per his instructions. He's going to offer this great sacrifice to Baal. Anyone who fails to appear will be killed. And I'm sure word is starting to get out that Jehu is a guy who means business. If he's going to go kill someone, he's going to do it. He doesn't mess around. He is a man of action. He is a man of war. So he has no problems going out and killing people who do not do what he says. So we see that all the servants of Baal in Israel, they come to the temple of Baal in Samaria. Again, this is the one that Ahab built. That's from 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 32, where we see that it's mentioned that he builds this temple. We have kind of a description of the temple being packed full. Everybody's there. I kind of imagine those trains in Japan where they have people's jobs, so it is to push people into the train so they can close the doors because they're so packed in there. I don't know if you've ever seen video of that, but that's kind of how I imagine it. It's just full of all these guys of Baal. They're all there. And we see actually both Jehu and Jehonadab from earlier are there. And he's declaring, obviously falsely, that the only servants here are servants of Baal. There's no servants of the Lord here, just servants of Baal, as if to be reassuring. I'm not exactly sure. And the servants of Baal begin the process of making these great sacrifices, burnt offerings to Baal. Now, unbeknownst to them, there's 80 armed men just outside the temple ready to kill all of them. Jehu has given them orders to go into the temple, kill everyone inside, don't leave any of them alive. You leave one alive, then it's your life you're going to be putting up. So these men under orders have every incentive to make sure not a single one of them gets out. So they're going to go through and they kill all of those in the temple of Baal. They follow the orders exactly. They throw the bodies outside. The images or sacred stones, depending on your translation, of Baal, they're taken out, destroyed. The temple of Baal itself is demolished, uses a latrine. This would be kind of an even bigger embarrassment and disrespect to Baal. No, we're not just going to destroy the place. We're just going to make it a place where people go to relieve themselves. That's what it's going to be used for now. Completely destroyed. Verse 28 is kind of the key here at the end. Verse 28 states that Jehu destroyed Baal worship in Israel. Period. There's no exceptions. There's no except fors yet. We're going to get to that in verse 29. But as far as Baal worship goes, specifically Baal worship, it is gone. It is eradicated. He's destroyed Ahab's house. He's destroyed Ahab's religion, or Jezebel's religion, perhaps. It might be more accurate, but he's wiped it all out. It's all gone. It's all clean slate, wiped clean, nothing left of it. Now, we stopped at verse 28. We're going to see verse 29. There are a few problems Jehu had. We're not going to talk about them yet. I'm going to save those for this next section. But any thoughts, comments about this section, the destruction of the temple of Baal and the prophets of Baal? It's pretty straightforward. I don't really have much more to say about it. He does it. Jehu goes through and he does it. Okay. Let's move on to the last part of this chapter then. Someone read for us verses 29 through 36, please. 29 through 36, and I think that's the end of the chapter. Yeah. Okay. So, I'm going to refer back to verse 16 again, where he says to Jehonadab, "Come and see my zeal for the Lord." Now, up to verse 28, yep, seems like he's got the zeal for the Lord. He's wiped out Ahab's household. He's, as God instructed, he's wiped out all the prophets of Baal. He's destroyed the temple of Baal in Samaria. Yeah, it seems like this guy has a lot of zeal for the Lord. But then we get to verse 29, and you're like, oh, come on, Jehu, you were there. You were on the right track. But what happens? He continues to commit the sins all the way back to Jeroboam, son of Nebat. It specifically mentions in these verses that he was worshiping the golden calves. These were set up by Jeroboam way early on in his reign, so these have been around in Bethel and Dan a long time. If you go back to 1 Kings chapter 12, specifically verses 28 through 30, it talks about Jeroboam setting up these idols in these places. The idea was, we've gone away from Judah, we've gone away from the house of David, but if they keep going down to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices, they might be inclined to rejoin Judah, and then I'm not going to have any power. They're probably going to kill me. It's usually what happens to usurpers of the throne and traitors. So he sets up these idols kind of in his own self-interest, and this just continues to be a problem for Israel. Even Jehu, who had done all these things to wipe out Baal, is committing these same sins. He is apparently in some, where we don't get a lot of detail, but he's doing something with these idols, some kind of idol worship here, specific to these. So when we see in verse 16, "Come and see my zeal for the Lord," well, that zeal didn't extend to everything, apparently. He falls short in just the most sad and fantastic way. After all of this, he could not bring it around to completely get rid of idol worship in Israel, just Baal. Maybe because of its association with an Ahab, I'm not sure, but he certainly falls short. It's really kind of sad to see. But there is a little bit, I guess, accommodation from God here. Verse 30, God does promise to Jehu that because he did follow the instructions to wipe out the house of Ahab, and he did so, he would allow Jehu's descendants to remain on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. Now that sounds like a really nice promise. Oh yeah, my family will be around till then. But God doesn't say anything about after that. I'm not going to go to all the verses that talk about what happens after. But we talk about Jehu's reign. He reigns 28 years. Then his son Jehoahaz becomes king in Israel. So there's one generation. His son Jehoash becomes king after him. That's 2 generations. Jeroboam, this would be Jeroboam the second. This would be the Jeroboam during the prophet Amos's time. There's your 3rd generation. And then Zechariah becomes king after him. There's your 4th generation. Zechariah, 6 months into his reign, is assassinated and his throne is usurped. So he doesn't get any more than that 4. God cuts it short right after that promise is fulfilled. That promise is fulfilled. God's like, okay, we got to get this family out of here now. Let's bring in someone else. We are constantly switching royal families here in Israel. It's just another example of that happening. So God fulfills his word. In fact, if you look at, let me actually go to one section of verses here. 2 Kings, verse 15. Let me read verses 8 through 12 just real quick here. This is talking about Zechariah, the last king here of Jehu's line. It says, in the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Zechariah, son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 6 months. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his fathers had done. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. So there's that still going on, which he had caused Israel to commit. Shallum, son of Jabesh, conspired against Zechariah. He attacked him in front of the people, assassinated him, and succeeded him as king. And then that's it. Well, that's not it. Let me keep reading. The other events of Zechariah's reign, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Israel? So the word of the Lord spoken to Jehu was fulfilled. Your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. Then it goes on to talking about Shallum, king of Israel after that. So God kept his promise. Now, you could say, this is God maybe being merciful to Jehu because he did do the main thing he was told to do. But probably if Jehu had not followed in the ways of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, not gone under the idol worship of those calves, he probably would have been, we don't know how long his family line would have gone. Probably longer would be my guess. So, just a very interesting and maybe sad detail there about Jeroboam and his family. So they do not last on the throne after that. Getting back to 2 Kings chapter 10 here. Verse 31 just kind of piles on here. It says that Jehu was not careful to keep the law of the Lord, as if that wasn't already clear from verse 29. Verses 32 and 33 then describe kind of the weakening of Israel, loss of territory. Hazael, king of Aram, is still a problem. He hasn't gone away just because Ahab's household has been destroyed. He is still a threat to Israel. He still desires Israel's territory. Remember when Elisha went to anoint Hazael, king of Aram, he cries because he knows what Hazael is going to do to Israel. It's going to be terrible things. Hazael is a long-term problem. It's not, even though Ben-Hadad has died, the threat of the country of Aram has not gone away. Hazael, if anything, is even worse than Ben-Hadad in that regard, as far as his politics and hostility toward Israel. So that's still going on. That territorial loss is going to last for a while. There will be some regaining later, but it's like the glory, the prime zenith time of Israel and Judah, it's past. Especially for Israel, it's long past. Basically, after the kingdom divides, after Solomon, that nation or nations, however you want to describe it, they never quite get to that zenith again. It's kind of you get it mostly downhill with a couple good things, and then, they slack off again. They go away from the Lord, and God punishes them for it. So like I said, Jehu reigns for 28 years. He's buried in Samaria. Jehoahaz takes up the throne after him. And then we kind of talked about, again, after you get, 4 generations down, Jehu's line ceases to exist in Israel. Comments, questions about that? Jehu kind of reminds me a little bit of King Saul. He starts out really good. He seems to be doing everything right with God. But then as soon as his desires and God's will kind of divide a little bit, he takes his own path. So there's kind of some similarities there. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems to be once he came to power and didn't have any opposition anymore, he thought maybe I don't need God anymore. I mean, it's really interesting because he knows what God has said and what God has done. We go back to where he kills Joram. He says, and of course, Joram dies in the territory of Naboth's field. There's no coincidence there. And he says, oh, hey, remember when we were with Ahab and Elijah came and said, like, hey, your line's going to die out, your blood's going to be here. And it's like the word of the Lord's been fulfilled. He remembers that. Apparently he was there. He's not mentioned in that moment, but he recalls it as if he is there or was present during that time. So he says, yeah, the word of the Lord is fulfilled. Then he goes and he kills Jezebel in Jezreel. And, they talk about, oh, yeah, we don't have really anything to bury. It seems like the wild dogs have taken most of her body away. And he's like, oh, yeah, this is, the word of the Lord being fulfilled because this is what Elijah said would happen to Jezebel. So he knows God. He has seen the fulfillment. How does he miss it? It's frustrating. But, like we say this as if, these people are dumb and don't know what they're doing. We do the exact same things. So we are not immune to this. It's really a warning to us. Don't think that we're so much better. We're not immune. We're immune to these temptations. We're not like them. We're just like them. And that's the warning here. We need to don't just say, hey, look at my zeal for the Lord up to a certain point, and then, where's that zeal now? It's frustrating. It's really frustrating. So any other comments, thoughts on this chapter? Okay, we've got a few minutes. I'm going to start chapter 11. We obviously won't get very far, but I'd like to start chapter 11. Someone read for us 2 Kings 11, verses 1 through 3. Just 1 through 3, please. Okay, so we're turning our attention now from chapter 10, being really focused on what's going on in Israel, to now we're going to turn to Judah here in chapter 11. Second Chronicles gives a little bit more detail of this story, but it's very minor things. If there's a thing I want to bring up from Second Chronicles, I'll just kind of mention it and reference it for you, and you can look. But the story is relatively pretty much the same here in chapter 11, so I'm not going to make us read huge sections of Second Chronicles just for this. But we need to have a quick recap here of how we got into this situation, because it is so weird. It's wrong. It's bad. So remember Ahab's father Omri. He's one of those usurpers of the throne. He has a son Ahab. Ahab married Jezebel. Jezebel is the daughter of the king of Sidon. Okay, not an Israelite. Okay, just remember that. And then Ahab, he has Ahaziah, who reigns after him for a very short time until he dies. He has no heirs, so his brother Joram becomes king. Joram, of course, is killed by Jehu. So they are all dead and gone, but there's a sister, Athaliah, daughter of Ahab. Sometimes she's called the granddaughter of Omri. Doesn't really make it any better. She had married Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat had gone into an alliance with the house of Ahab. He had his son marry Ahab's daughter as part of that union. We talked about this as early as 1 Kings. It's mentioned that they have this alliance. This is where it comes from. So Jehoram and Athaliah, remember Athaliah is the daughter of Jezebel and Ahab. Don't know what you expect from that. It's not good though. Remember when I said things are going to get worse? We're here now. We're at the worst. So Jehoram and Athaliah have several children. I put other sons here just because they're not named. But we've read over this a little bit. We mentioned it in 2 Chronicles chapter 21, verses 16 to 17. It talks about during the reign of Jehoram, Philistine and Arab raiders came in and they invaded and took all these things from Jehoram's house, including all of his sons, except for the youngest, Ahaziah, which is not the same Ahaziah as this Ahaziah. Same name, different guy. But Ahaziah was the youngest. He was not going to be first in line to the throne. So when all of his brothers are taken away in the invasion, he's the only one left. So when Jehoram dies, Ahaziah becomes king. And this is the Ahaziah who is with Joram when Jehu goes to knock out the house of Ahab. Remember, he's there to kill Joram, but like, oh, look, Ahaziah is here too. Let's kill him also. So Ahaziah also dies, in the chapters we just read, when Jehu goes through and kills the house of Ahab. So he is dead. Now, he has sons. So one of them, in theory, should be able to succeed to the throne. The only problem is his mother is the daughter of Jezebel and Ahab, which when I say is bad news, here we are. She, instead of allowing, one of her grandsons to become the next king of Judah, she decides, I'm going to kill all of them, and I'm going to reign on the throne. This is basically the granddaughter of the king of Sidon, who was part of the house of Ahab, is now sitting on the throne in Judah. If that doesn't make sense, European history is just the same as this nonsense. This is how we get into trouble in Judah, is this connection. And I'm not going to say Judah had no problems before this, but certainly things get worse. There is a slight recovery after all these events. We won't really get into all of them. But any of you who know the history of Judah know things don't really bounce back fully. There's constantly idol worship that's never completely wiped out from this point on. And, I bet you Athaliah has something to do with it. I have no doubt. So she goes through and she's killing all of her, basically her grandsons and any relatives to them. But one escapes, Joash, because his aunt, the sister of Ahaziah, Jehosheba, takes him, gets his nurse also, hides them away. It almost sounds like while the slaughter's going on. I'm not sure exactly how to read that timeline, but she gets him out before he dies. Everyone else seems to die except for Joash. Now, one other detail we get from 2 Corinthians, my notes just closed on me, is Jehosheba is, I'm trying to see where it's in 2 Chronicles 22. Jehosheba is also the wife of Jehoiada, who is a priest in the temple of the Lord, which seems to be why she's able to hide them there with not a lot of issues. She's got an inside man in the temple who can kind of help out with that. So Joash is going to be hiding in the temple of the Lord for 6 to 7 years. In the 7th year, that's going to change. But Jehoiada, the priest, is the one really making sure that he stays safe, out of sight, away from Athaliah. How she does not eventually figure out where he is, she has 6 years to find him. I'm sure they did a body count because you wouldn't want to know, hey, is there anyone who's going to have any power to usurp my throne, anyone who has a claim to it? I want to take those people out. We're not given a lot of detail, and we're not really given much detail about Athaliah's reign at all, which seems almost strange because even when we're kind of like just going through a story and someone's sort of a side character in it, 6 years is a lot of time for things to happen, but her reign is not really talked about in any detail at all until the 7th year when all that changes. So that may be because she was so very much disliked that they just kind of wiped it out from record. That is a thing that happened in ancient times. If you really didn't like someone, you just wiped out any memory of them. That was what you would go. You would go and destroy any records of them, or you would change the record. You'd put little details in there, you'd change it. That's not an uncommon thing. We've seen that in other places in history. So yeah, that's the situation. When I say things are getting worse, we're here now. This is it. Athaliah, again, the daughter of Jezebel and Ahab, the granddaughter of the king of Sidon, is sitting on the throne in Judah for 6 years after wiping out almost the entire royal family, except for Joash, who is hiding in the temple. Now, I want to mention, before we're out of time, but I want to mention Jehoiada again. He's going to be a really key character in Joash's in reign, not just hiding him for these 6 years and then kind of helping him get back to the throne. But even after that, he's kind of the father figure. He's the one he looks to we'll talk about that as we go through chapters 11 and 12. But we're going to have to stop there. We're actually way out of time, but we started late, so it's fine, right? But anyway, that's the situation going on. So chapter 11, chapter 12, we're going to be talking about Judah a bit. And then chapter 13 will be the last chapter I intend to cover in this study. And then we're going to move on to another study. But just so we keep everything clear about who is all going on here, that's what's going on. It's sometimes easier to draw it out because this person being on the throne of Judah doesn't make sense otherwise. This is how it's happened. And you could say, if one little thing had changed, like maybe Jehoshaphat not being so, which I spelled that wrong. There should be an H right there. Now that I'm seeing that. There. That was my problem. If Jehoshaphat had not been so eager to have an alliance with the house of Ahab, it really would have saved his descendants a lot of trouble. That's my view of it. Jehoshaphat, great king, except for he committed some really bad thing that really kind of didn't help his descendants later on. By and large, considered a good king, but even he had his faults, as they all do. So we're going to stop there. We'll pick up. We'll probably review this a little bit when we start next week, but we'll pick up in verse 4 next week and really kind of start, how do you come back from this when the whole royal family of Judah has been wiped out except for one, and he's very young. We'll talk about his age when we get to it next week. So we'll stop there. If you haven't already, go ahead and read the rest of chapter 11, maybe even start chapter 12. I'm not sure if we'll start that next week or not, but we'll definitely get through the rest of 11. So thank you very much.